Hey everybody, thank you for joining us on the FareCompare weekly video podcast. My name is Rick Sini. I'm the co-founder and CEO. Episode number 26, cracking the 24 mark. That's pretty cool. Today we're going to chat about a couple of news topics. One is spring break. I know a lot of people are going to be heading out to spring break. Many of us will be heading out early in March here coming, so that's something that we can chat about. Some of the deals that are still out there right now. Some are cheaper, some are more expensive. We'll talk some about those destinations. Also, what happens when your airline screws up, and then what do you do, and how do you handle that when you and 130 of your best friends are all trying to get a hold of the airline? Also, we're going to be chatting a little bit about airlines with the most loyal passengers. I think probably many of you will know who's at the top of that list, and then we'll take some questions for customers. And joining me today to chat about things is our editor from the site at FareCompare.com, Ann McDermott. Hey, Ann.
Hey, Rick. As you know, Tuesday, and that's today, is Deals Day, and I was just looking at a whole bunch of deals. There's a lot out there right now.
Right.
The one that is making me laugh is Spirit Airlines. They have a thing about the Oscars. It shows a young man hoisting up an Oscar. It says fifth time's a charm, but the best part about the ad is it has a bear draped around the guy in a romantic pose. Now, what this has to do with a sale, I have no idea.
It sounds like they're trying to do a little play on who the top picks for movies are, but sometimes I really can't tell with Spirit Airlines. Their marketing department definitely is one of the craziest, and we've seen that over the last 4 or 5 years. Some of their campaigns have been on the edge. I can't imagine what they'll do during the political cycle if Trump ends up being the nominee. I'll have to see more about what happens there.
Let's talk about airlines with loyal passengers, and by loyalty, we're talking about miles programs, loyalty programs, point programs, whatever you want to call them. And a study from Brand Keys Customer Loyalty Engagement Index has some kind of surprising stuff in it. People that you would think would be very loyal to airlines, maybe not so much. But the number one airline for loyal customers is JetBlue, which kind of surprises me a little bit. But apparently their program is considered one of the best.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't get to fly JetBlue. I've only flown it a few times since I'm based in Dallas. They have one flight to Boston out of here, and that's about it. So I don't know a huge amount about their particular program, but I was surprised to see the list with JetBlue at the top, and Air Canada, and then Delta number 3. Ahead of United and American and Southwest. I guess WestJet was in there tied with Southwest for number 5. I was a little bit surprised. You know, you have American is the biggest airline in the world, certainly the biggest loyalty program. All of the major airlines, at least the 4 that control 80% of traffic, now have this new revenue-based or dollar-based point system instead of miles-based point system. So I'm not so sure what else makes you loyal other than the fact that you're in bigger cities and you're more loyal. I was surprised Virgin America didn't make the list as well.
Well, one thing about JetBlue's program, from what I understand, is that the miles never expire, which is becoming kind of an issue for a lot of people. And they may get, a lot of the leisure people that aren't particularly care about being loyal to an airline. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm one of those non-loyal people. Partly because where I live, I have a lot of choice of airlines, so I pretty much just go with the cheapest, and I know I'm not going to fly enough to make it really worth my while, particularly since wouldn't you say that a lot of the loyalty programs are all skewed toward business travel these days?
Yeah, really, I think they're really concentrating on business travelers, those people that travel quite a lot and then use their miles and points, in this particular case, nowadays to fly their family on leisure vacations. And I will note, Ann, at least a month ago, I had to actually buy a magazine subscription, my daughter's miles account, because she has several 100,000 miles because they were about to expire, and we hadn't flown. We've been flying on some mile trips lately, so she hadn't flown in a while, and so in order to keep it up to date, we actually bought a magazine subscription with miles so she would have some activity in her account, because that's when it expires if you have no activity, anywhere typically between 18 months and 24 months. Now, Delta has sort of vacillated back and forth. They do expire, they don't expire. I think they're at the don't expire amount, so maybe that's why they're up at number 3.
Well, I find myself still getting emails from some airlines that I haven't flown in years telling me that my miles are about to expire, and I'm scratching my head thinking, what? Those things are still good, and an account with like 3 miles in it, something like that. But
yeah, the airlines, that is a virtual currency. They do sell those miles to credit card companies and a variety of other businesses to hand out, so they do have value associated with them. It's really tougher for me to calculate the value nowadays, given how they do the points and how the bonuses occur really for people that are loyal and elite customers on airlines. So it's hard for me to tell, but historically, we've seen people like JetBlue, and then Southwest recently moved to this program. Before it was sort of like take so many flights, get so many free, right? Now it's more complicated. There's all sorts of what you pay, and if you pay more, you get more. If you're elite status at certain levels, you get multipliers. You have to be a hobbyist to really keep track of all this stuff nowadays.
Let's talk spring break. If somebody wants to go someplace for spring break and they don't have their tickets yet, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, look, I mean, you're a little late in the game, but there's always some good deals. The question is where, right? So if you come to our site, we'll have listings of different places and spring break dates. You're going to have to be kind of selective on where you go. If you're going warm weather or cold weather, if you're in the case of skiing or maybe even just visiting. And also the days that you go are really important. The weekends, try to stay away from them if you can. Tuesday, Saturday itineraries are pretty good at the last minute, or even Tuesday, Friday. I know it sort of cuts off the entire week, but at least you'll save some money getting to your destination. Hotels and stuff are in certain popular locations are sold out by now, so you'll have to do some work there. But there's lots of choices with Airbnb and a variety of these other home away sites and stuff where you can find some place to stay. So. Really, there are a few deals. I was actually looking out of Dallas in March in a variety of places. Dallas is one of the cheaper cities to fly out. I found several deals to the West Coast, South Florida, even to the Northeast. Denver was inexpensive still. So it just depends on your city. Just take a quick look at FareCompare and you can find a couple deals.
I was interested to see that comparing, you did this with our some of our data.
Sure.
You compared last year flights prices purchased in February with this year, and to popular destinations, and these are averages, of course. But San Juan, Puerto Rico is almost 14% cheaper than last year, and that's pretty unusual.
Yeah, and that's been sort of dominated by JetBlue in the last few years. American had a stronghold there for a while, and now JetBlue is basically now taking over Puerto Rico, and that's a pretty good dip. That's 14% dip in the way we calculate that. From a trending standpoint is pretty good. Also in Europe, Brussels has dipped pretty dramatically. We also saw some cities like Reykjavik, Amsterdam, some of the Nordic countries are all cities, Stockholm, Copenhagen, for example, Oslo have been cheaper as well. On the more expensive side, Cabo San Lucas, which is a little bit odd, it's part of the triad of Mexican beaches, South Padre being a bit more expensive as well. So,
yeah.
Also, I noticed the one that caught my eye was Miami, about 8% up.
Yeah. And part of this has to do with, when things get, cities get popular, cities, sort of wane
Sure.
Wax and wane in popularity, and I guess it's sort of their time. And I see Denver is actually a little more expensive. But even though that is the case, it's still like one of the cheaper destinations to go to in the U.S.
Yeah, these are year-over-year calculations. So if they were cheap last year and it's only up 4%, it's still cheap.
Yeah, yeah.
So I know, I'm one to do statistics in certain ways. I'm pretty strict about how we decide to do things and how we use averages and percentages and whatnot. So, and I always want to make sure that we put them in context, because numbers matter and they mean something. Different numbers mean different things to different people, and so we talk about that quite a bit on the podcast. So keep watching as we start to dig more into these numbers. I got a whole bunch of new numbers coming out. I was poking through our database of over a petabyte of airfare data that we've been collecting over the last 2 years that we've been processing, and found some real cool stuff. Trying to get that out to the website and everybody on our email list, so be sure and sign up for that as well. I noticed, and I'll have to tell you, I don't look at these questions ahead of time, so I noticed we got a couple questions.
We do. We've got Mike from Kansas City, and his question is pretty straightforward. He says, I'm going to Seattle for a wedding, July 8th to the 12th. When should I buy my ticket? And he's saying that, he's been looking at prices already. He sees they're not too bad, but he also sees sort of them going up. And plus, I guess he's got some concerns about, the fact that it's the peak summer season, 4th of July, blah, blah.
And he's spot on, right? So this is right in the heart of the most expensive summertime travel season. Now, I'm not sure what day of the week the 8th is. I'll have to bring up a calendar here real quick on my desktop to see what date that is. July the 8th is it looks like it's a Friday, yeah. So it's a Friday. Yeah, so leaving on a Friday and coming back apparently on a Monday Tuesday. Or Tuesday, yeah. Yeah, so that's great. Coming back on a Tuesday is great. Leaving on a Friday, not terrible. It's one of the most expensive days. Really, the airlines can't tell whether or not you're actually coming back home from a business trip on Friday evening, or if you're actually heading somewhere. So it's going to be a little bit more expensive on the outbound. A better choice, for example, would be Thursday or Saturday if you really were trying to fly cheap. So as far as going to Seattle and from Kansas City's prices, and I do a lot of looking at airfare, have been up slightly year over year. Going out to Seattle, if you take a look at those price points right now, that they range wildly, if I recall now, between around $210 round trip up to about $290 round trip. So it's still under 300, which is good. It's one of the luxuries of being in a city that's in smack dab in the middle of the United States. It helps, by the way. Seattle's actually been one of the cheaper cities to fly to. There's been sort of a fare war between, at least a hub war between Delta and Alaska there in Seattle. It's been one of the cheapest cities to fly to, so it's a good choice. Also, flying in July, you need to start shopping about 3 months ahead of time. We're a little early for that. Not quite. I'd go ahead and kick the tires. He says the prices are okay in his note. I'm not sure what he defines as okay at the moment, but I would expect those.
He also says he sees them going up a little bit, but I suppose that could actually mean, what day of the week were you looking at prices? Because it all changes, right?
Yeah, it's going to change, and especially if you sign up for alerts on our site, you'll see different price points change all the time. Mm-hmm. I would expect that price to come down a little from where it is right now, in the next month and a half or so. But what you don't want to do is buy that ticket in June or May. You definitely want to buy that ticket sometime in the April timeframe. So if I was going to recommend to buy or not, now if they throw out a crazy sale and you see great prices on the 8th through the 12th and you see something in the low 200s, snap it up.
Good advice. Okay, we've got a question from Chris in Chicago. And Chris is lucky enough, he or she and the family of 5 are going on a trip to Italy. They're going to Florence, leaving from Rome, so I guess they're flying Chicago to Rome and then going on to Florence, probably by train or possibly by, I don't know, they don't say. But anyway, they're doing a 10-day cruise, and they're going to be some visiting other cities in Italy. And the question is, are you aware of any good tours that won't cost a bunch of money?
Well, the interesting thing about that is typically I'm how to get there cheap, and my wife actually is handling sort of all the stuff that's there. But I am actually going basically similar route. We're going to be flying into Rome and hanging out in Italy for a couple weeks in the summertime. So I'm quite up on that. And and to be honest, I don't know if I've ever said this, but Florence is one of my favorite cities in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from a tour perspective, we have a couple different people that we go to that we think are great for tours. Maybe what we should do is post them in a particular article, for this. I hate to say their name on the video podcast because I don't know if they want a flood of people giving them a call directly. But there's unbelievable things to do. I'll give you a few examples, right? So if you're going to be in Rome for a day or two, depending on what day of the week it is, they have some tours early in the morning around 7 a.m. where you can get in the Sistine Chapel. It costs a little bit extra money, but you don't have 50 million people packed in with you.
Right.
Getting a good tour guide to, look up at the ceiling and see, God sort of whirling around and having some plumber's crack up there in the ceiling is sort of funny, and having somebody tell you about the cardinal at the bottom right corner that didn't pay Michelangelo enough and got his face in hell in the bottom right corner of the back part of the Sistine Chapel, and having the letter that he sent to the Pope saying, you can't have my face in hell, and the Pope sending back a letter saying you shouldn't have pissed off Michelangelo. Those kind of things are really, really funny. And if you find a good tour guide, you can really have a good time. So I definitely would recommend that. The Vatican's unbelievable with a good tour guide, especially if you can get in to the Sistine Chapel early. As far as Florence is concerned, one of the most unbelievable museums there. There's actually a special part, if you can go, depending on when you go, of the museum that goes over the Ponte Vecchio with the bridge there. So there's some tours that you can do. You have to do a little hacking to see if you can get into that. So you can see I'm sort of up on this because I've done it a few times and I continue to want to do it because it's so cool. And certainly the wine country outside of Florence within an hour and a half radius is pretty awesome as well.
I do know that there are a lot of things that you can, like tours of specific attractions, like you mentioned the Uffizi Gallery and like, say, the Colosseum, you want to tour that. There's a lot of these things that you can sign up ahead of time online and pay for it ahead of time, and that'll save you a bundle of time. There are a million tours of the Vatican, and I took one recently, and in fact they mentioned the picture of I saw Michelangelo's face in hell. But there are all kinds of things. If you haven't done any looking, just see what's out there online and start asking questions. And I think your idea of posting something about specific tours that you've enjoyed would be a great idea, and we should do that.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to get this one with an event, but I want to make sure that this tour guide that we always take actually is cool with that. Yeah. So I don't want to post them before they know that, because they may have their own set of grouping that they want to do there. But look, there's plenty of stuff out there. There's unbelievable tour guides. One of the ones that with small kids that we've done in the past, we did this at the Louvre in France, was sort of a Da Vinci Code tour where they actually put clues throughout the Louvre, and especially with younger kids, and they can go pick up clues, and it takes you to different parts of the museum. There's some really clever tours out there, and TripAdvisor is a great resource for that. I know, when my wife was looking for some of these things, she had some friends. There's some great people on Twitter you can follow, and there's several, depending on what you want to do. Do you want to go real cheap, or do you want to actually do a little bit more expensive tour? Do you want it to be with your group? We're going to actually have a group, I think, of 8 or 9 that are going this time, which makes the logistics a little more complicated with vans and whatnot. So definitely, I will post an article for this. But that is going to be an unbelievable trip. They're going to love that trip, especially. I'm not sure if they're cruising out of Rome, if they're going to be doing exactly where that cruise is going. But some of those cities that you can get to via boat that are difficult to get to, via air, are absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll have a great time. So let's close this off by talking about Eventurist?
Yeah, I am so psyched about the Avintrist app, the native app that we have on Android and iOS. I think last time I just got a new report with some statistics, well over 100 events in there. They have all sorts of great information, just beautiful photography flipping through it. So please check that out on the App Store. And also on the Google Play Store, so you can check out the Avintrist app from FareCompare. Just type in FareCompare or Avintrist. All sorts of clever things. I've seen the list of the events that we're going to be adding, another 50 or so, and I'm super excited. Which includes, by the way, one of the ones that I just mentioned on the podcast here. So we'll be getting those out soon. So be sure and do that. And also, if you want to catch the video podcast, some older ones, especially on some topics that may be, areas like Europe and some other issues, catch those on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and some of the other places where you can get the podcast.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Ann.